a tremendous pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank the organizers for their very kind invitation. And I would like to also thank the translators over there in that booth for their tireless and marvelous work translating our talks. So today I would like to speak to you about autism, spectrum disorders as they emerge, as they express themselves in the first 3 years of life. We're going to talk about early symptoms, and my talk follows very nicely the talk by Dr. Kathy Lord. I will go into more details with regard to diagnosing young children with autism. We'll also talk about what happens in the development of children who are later diagnosed with autism. What happens when they are 6 months old, 12 months old? So we'll talk, in other words, we'll talk about the program of autism. And finally, I'm going to talk about some of the aspects that we have been investigating, some of the aspects of social attention that we have been investigating in my lab in relation to early onset of autism. Based on several talks this morning, I'm sure you have a very good sense by now that autism is a complex neurodevelopmental disorder. Now, it's quite challenging when we think about diagnosing this kind of multifaceted disorder in very, very young children. First of all, we really don't know what is the etiology of autism. For that reason, we don't have any biological markers. We cannot run a blood test. We cannot scan the brain and decide who has or doesn't have autism. And for that reason, we have to rely very heavily on the analysis of the phenotype or behavior presentation of the children who are presenting to us for differential diagnosis. The problem is that this phenotype or behavior presentations are very complex. Children with autism differ from one another along many dimensions. Some of them we know, some of them we have not recognized yet. Some children with autism are tremendously perturbed by proximity of other people, and they avoid them actively. Other children might be actually interested in interacting with other children. However, they lack the basic capacity to understand implicit rules of social engagement. Some children will be profoundly cognitively impaired, others will be very bright. Some will never develop speech, others will be verbose. Now, several hypotheses have been advanced to explain this kind of heterogeneity, and one of them suggests that perhaps what we are dealing with is not a single disorder, but a number of disorders that are caused by somewhat distinct mechanisms that all converge on the outlying social disability. To make things even more complicated, children with autism are also at risk for developing other related disorders. Amongst them are attention deficit disorder, or ADHD, anxiety, or learning disabilities. Now, these disorders typically are not diagnosed until the child is 4, 5, 6 years old. However, the precursors or early signs or early features of these disorders are very likely to be present already in infancy. So at the time we see a very young child in our clinic, we need to sort out his or her clinical presentation in comparison, so thinking which symptoms are falling into the category of autism and which might be driven by attention problems or emergent anxiety. To make things even more difficult, as you know, autism is a developmental disorder. What does it mean? It means that symptoms of autism can be quite different depending on the developmental level. In some behaviors, for instance, exploratory play, like mouthing things, banging, shaking, could be perfectly normative when the child is about 8 to 10 months old. However, if this behavior is not replaced by higher levels of play and persists when the child is 18 or 20 months old, it becomes a problem. It becomes a symptom. So anytime we see a very young child, we need to think about what is the neurodevelopmental age of that system, of that child, and what do we expect from this child with regard to verbal ability, nonverbal ability, social, play, and other skills. As you probably know, autism is a very, very prevalent disorder. Current estimates suggest that we have about 14 or 15 children per 1,000. Male to female ratio is about 4 to 1. It's not clear whether it's only due to biological factors or whether perhaps our diagnostic instruments have been designed as to detect more readily autism in males rather than females. That, as you heard from Dr. Happett, this is an area of very active investigation. Boys and girls can present quite differently. Boys tend to be more rambunctious, more active, they may have more behavioral problems and more stereotypies. Girls tend to be more anxious, withdrawn, and have fewer repetitive behaviors. We've known for a very, very long time that autism onsets typically before the child turns 3. However, in most countries, including the US, children are not diagnosed until they are 4, 5, 6, or even 7 years old. So there's this tremendous gap between the time when the syndrome emerges and the time it's being diagnosed. And this is the gap that we are attempting to close with the work we do in my lab or Dr. Kathy Lord lab and many other labs about which you will hear during this presentation. Now, I would like, in my real life, I wear 2 hats. I direct a clinic for infants and toddlers who are presenting for differential diagnosis of autism, but I also lead a lab that's focused on pretty basic research with regard to attention. So I'm going to talk about these 2 streams or these 2 lines of research this afternoon. I would like to give you some examples with regard of what autism looks like in a very young child. We have videos. I prepared this talk today with the idea that we may have some parents and also clinicians and professionals in the field, so I prepared some videos. I'm hoping that we can play them. We may not have audio, so I will narrate them to you, but they're pretty explicit in terms of the nonverbal content as well. So, what does autism look like in a, let's say, 18-month-old baby? How do we diagnose autism in young children, knowing the complexity, knowing the uncertainties? I think the word carefully is probably a key one here. Diagnostic assessment of very young children usually is pretty extensive because we need to understand the child's level of functioning on in multiple dimensions. We also need to understand family history. We need to understand the family supports and environment. We need to understand whether there are any medical or family events that might be causing or contributing to the presentations that we see in a child. Typically, we evaluate the child's social skills, cognitive, verbal, adaptive skills. We interview parents with regard to medical history and developmental history. And very often send children also for additional tests in terms of genetics. You heard today from Dr. Matthew State about the utility of some of these tests as supportive in terms of differential diagnosis, and also neurological exam, as a small proportion of children with autism, even young ones, develop seizure within the first 3 years of life. One very important assessment is assessment of hearing, because this is usually the first complaint that we hear from parents when they present for the diagnosis, for assessment. Parents typically say, I don't think if my child can hear because my child doesn't respond when I speak to them. So what does a typical social interaction look like in someone who doesn't have extensive peer interactions? With babies, we are talking particularly about relationships with parents and siblings and other family members. I think the first thing you notice when you see a child presenting in the clinic is how little they are interested in other people. Babies typically monitor other people because they want to know what do they do, what do they plan, what their intentions are. When you walk into the room with a child with autism, you notice how little they monitor what they do. We sometimes think that lack of eye contact is a sign of autism. In fact, some children do make eye contact, however, they make it at the wrong time and for the long length of time. This is the kind of eye contact that seems odd because it seems not very well meshed with other activities happening in the room. One of the very earliest developing types of social interaction is the interaction face-to-face with another person. This is the situation when the mom talks to the baby coos back, mom laughs, the baby smiles. And that first engagement into face-to-face exchanges requires turn-taking and usually is quite pleasurable for a child, so we see a lot of smiling, a lot of happy vocalizations, and a lot of focus on mom's face. This is something that you typically don't see in children with autism. They don't seem to engage in this back and forth conversation, and when they do, they don't appear to be deriving a lot of pleasure from them. The second level up from in terms of development of social interaction is development of the ability to share with others one's own experiences. We call it joint attention, and it pretty much means being able to bring others into our own world of experiences. You know, if you go outside this hotel, these spectacular modern buildings, and I looked at them yesterday, and my first thought was, well, I wish my husband could be there so I could show it to him. Somehow, having the experience shared with someone else gives us a sense that there's something more to it. It gives us more pleasure. Children with autism don't do a lot of that. Typically, the children do it by sharing, by giving objects to people, by pointing things to others. And we typically don't see that. Another thing that's typically lacking in children with autism is the ability to socially reference their parents. Children learn tremendous amount about the world by simply looking at parents and reading information from their faces. When something new happens and the parent frowns and the child looks at the parent's face, reads that information and uses this information to regulate their own behavior. Rather than approach something new, they are likely to withdraw. It's a very important mode of learning when you're a baby, and that mode of learning is not available to children with autism. And finally, our children sometimes can be very extremely emotionally aroused. They can be very unhappy, or sometimes very happy. But we see very low modulation, and we see very few emotions, such as surprise, in our children. And I lost the video. Oh, I've lost the video on my... Okay, all right. My computer has a life of its own. So let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of a video in which we try to engage a child with a mechanical toy, and it's a little bunny, and it's one of the probes from the ADOS that Dr. Lord described an hour ago. And what happens is we present a child with this toy. It's a little unexpected, it's a little scary, and we sort of wonder about what the child is going to do with that. And we look how they try to communicate about their experience with the adults in the room. In this case, we have a child who's about 20 months old and who has a very severe language delay. He practically has no language, but I would like you to watch what other means of communication he's using in this otherwise highly arousing situation. virtually no language, however, tremendously extensive repertoire of nonverbal means of communication, including squealing, smiling, looking, gestures, multiple references to adults in the room. In comparison, this is another boy who is the same age, the same level of cognitive skills as well, also very limited language. However, this child has autism. So, very similar situation, but very different repertoire of responses. You could see that this boy really enjoyed the toy tremendously. However, there was not a single instance of sharing his enjoyment or communicating his enjoyment to either his father or the examiner. There was also one very stark difference between these two boys. Any volunteers? There's one big difference between these two boys. The first boy immediately discovered how to operate this toy. How did he discover that? He discovered it because he monitored. He was watching what the other person was doing. The other boy, despite a this sequence lasted for a very long time, despite a very long time, very long exposure, he had tremendous difficulties learning this very simple means and behavior. And it's a very strong and very good example of how social disability can impact learning in the non-social domain. Now, another area of impairment in very young children is impairment in communication. Now, first of all, what we look at in the clinic is we want to understand how motivated is the child to communicate. Typically, developing child communicates about 2 to 3 times per minute. A child presenting in the clinic might be communicating 2 or 3 times per hour. So the frequency of communication is the first thing that we can notice readily. The second thing is that most children who come to our clinic have language delays. So nobody's talking, so we cannot use language as a discrimination between autism and non-autism. However, what is a very strong indicator of autism is the presence or absence of communicative gestures, use eye contact, facial expressions, and pointing, giving, showing as a mean of communication. Now, children with autism who learn to communicate with other people communicate primarily to get their needs met. So there are 2 reasons why we communicate. One, for instrumental purposes, to get our needs met. The second, for declarative purposes, or to share with other people. And what we see in autism is often this tremendous discrepancy between frequency of communication to request versus communication to share. And that's also very striking feature of autism that we do not see in children with garden variety language delay or developmental delay. When language begins to emerge in our kids, that's when we begin to see atypical features. That's where we see echolalia or verbatim repetition of what someone else said. That's where they begin to repeat longer strings of words. or text from books or from videos. There's also one very interesting feature with regard to communication, which is not present in all children with autism. It's present in about 40% of them. That means of communication is sometimes called hand-over-hand gesture. And it's basically a phenomenon in which a child uses another person's body part or hand as a tool. And here's an example of the situation when this little boy will need help with a toy. And it's not now, I'm just blocking him. We saw a similar phenomenon what Dr. Lord showed. And now he needs help with this little toy, Jack in the Box. And instead of giving it to me, he just grabbed my hand without looking at me and pulled my hand over the toy. When you see it, it's usually very specific to autism, but again, it's not a universal phenomenon in autism. Now, when we started seeing children under the age of 3 in our clinics, and we opened the first clinic for children with autism at Yale about 15 years ago, there was the idea that at this age we probably won't be seeing a lot of repetitive and stereotype behaviors. However, it turned out that even very young children show quite extensive repertoire of stereotype and repetitive behaviors. This includes unusual sensory interest in lights, in shapes, unusual interest in parts of objects, and so forth. We have several examples here. This little boy is extremely bright and he loves shapes. And anytime he sees a shape, he needs to move them in front of his eyes and label it. He said, circle, circle, square, and triangle. And that's something very subtle, nonetheless it's very pervasive. And it was very pervasive in his case. In case of this little guy, he loved to move around. And he incessantly walked around and around and around. This could last an hour easily. In other children, the stereotypies can be very subtle, and I would like to watch his left hand. This is a very unusual phenomenon at this age. This is a complex mannerism. It's putting hand to the mouth, extending it and saying, uh-oh. It looks very cute, but when it lasts a very long time and interferes with other adaptive skills, it becomes a symptom, it becomes a problem. So autism, as Dr. Harper mentioned in the morning, autism is not only about deficits and disabilities. Our kids, in many ways, are gifted in ways that other kids aren't. About 10% of children with autism develop unusual skills, and these skills can be in multiple areas. This could be fabulous musical skills, fantastic computational skills, memory, or artistic skills. And we see emergent features of this kind of ability already in toddlers. Our babies sometimes, before they talk, they can actually, they have tremendous attention to details and fantastic visual discrimination, which means that at 14, 16 months or 18 months, they can name very complex shapes and identify letters. This is before they begin to speak. Some have a very good memory, or some begin to sight read. They recognize signs. For instance, exit signs are very popular amongst our kids. Now, what does it mean? Does it mean that these children will be brilliant later on? Not necessarily. In some cases, these skills are transient, but in other cases, they are not. What happens, however, the parents, when they see a child to be interested in letters or numbers. They often are very, very happy, and they should be, thinking that the child is very bright and sort of overlook the fact that the child may be having many challenges with regard to social interaction or language development. And sometimes these children may be, for that reason, identified a little later than children who have more extensive developmental delays. Now, so when we opened the clinic 15 years ago, there was a very burning question on my mind, ethical question. What is the stability of these presentations? We see these very, very young children, and we see that they meet all the criteria for autism as early as 18 months. But what is the likelihood that they actually retain this diagnosis? What is the likelihood that they, in fact, have autism that will persist over time? So there was a number of studies in the late 1990s or early aughts, done by people like Kathy Lord and also some in our lab, that suggested that stability of early diagnosis done before the age of 3 was actually quite high, and ranging between 80 to 90%. That's not to say that children with autism don't change. They change tremendously. They acquire new skills. They improve to a large extent. Nonetheless, diagnostically, we don't see dramatic dropouts. But these studies were conducted at the time when children would come to a university clinic, they would be diagnosed with autism, sent home, and there wasn't much of early intervention or treatment that could help them get off their current developmental trajectories. More recently, things have changed. So in the area where I live, in Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, if a young child is diagnosed with autism, the child is sent home and is eligible for pretty extensive early intervention services. Interventionists come to the home of the child and deliver 10 to 20 hours face-to-face therapy focused on language, communication, cognition, behavior, and so forth. So what is the stability of the diagnosis when we not only diagnose children very early, but also intervene in a community at a very intensive level? Is the stability of the diagnosis going to drop? This is the question we had when we followed hundreds of toddlers who were seen in our clinic between 14 and 24 months, and then they were seen again when they were 3 or 4 years old. And it turns out that the stability of the diagnosis was still high. On average, about 90% of toddlers retained the diagnosis. What we did actually very early on, we clustered these children when they came for the first time for the visit. We clustered them early based on their clinical presentation, and then we saw how well did the cluster do. And the early clusters were, some of them are higher functioning, some of them are lower functioning. What happened was that there was not only tremendous stability of the diagnosis, but there was also very high stability of symptom severity, nonverbal functioning, and the only area in which we saw a marked change over time was language. Many children who were early diagnosed and received intervention made tremendous progress in terms of language development. The good news is that only about 16% of children in our cohort were actually children who were very severely impaired and were making very, very low progress over time. So we've been learning about clinic-referred samples for quite a while now. We know we can diagnose them. We know that the stability of the diagnosis is pretty good. But these are the children whose parents worried about them, or pediatricians worried about them, and they ended up in the clinic. There's a whole big group of children who don't end up in the clinic before the age of 3. So how do we learn about them? How do we learn how our children look like before they became symptomatic? Did they have other more subtle symptoms? The way we learn about it is by following prospectively a very special group of children. And these children are younger siblings of children with autism. Younger siblings of children with autism, due to genetic factors, are at increased risk for developing the disorder themselves. So the idea is that if we enroll 100 siblings and follow them from birth until the age of 3, some of them will develop autism, some of them will not. But those who will, we will be able to follow from very early childhood into the age where we can actually diagnose these children reliably. And we're conducting this kind of study at Yale, and we are conducting it so do several other centers around the country, around the world. So what is the recurrence risk amongst younger siblings of children with autism? And I know that this question came out this morning with Matt State's talk, so I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit. There's a pretty wide range of estimates with regard to recurrence rate of autism amongst younger siblings. And the variability comes from the methods we use to ascertain these samples. So in one of such studies, in twin studies, the concordance rate or concurrence rate of autism amongst dizygotic twins. Dizygotic twins share the same amount of genetic material as any other sibling. Was very high, it was about 31%. But in this case, not only there was some shared genetic variance, but there was also pretty high load with regard to environmental variance that relates to both children sharing the same utero. The studies that we conduct, which are prospective studies of infant siblings, which we recruit at university centers, suggest recurrence rates between, I would say, between 18 and 25%, which is pretty high, but lower what we see in twin studies. This rate can also be somewhat biased because it's biased due to self-selection of the sample. We don't know exactly who are the parents who decide to come to our studies and stay with us for 3 years and come 10 times for very long visits and experimental visits. There's an epidemiologic study, very recent, where the recurrence rates are about 10% or so. So that should probably lay somewhere between, probably between 8, maybe and 15%. Now, these numbers should not be used by individual families to make a decision about having or not having a certain child. These decisions should be made based on face-to-face conversations with genetic counselors. There are many, many more factors on the individual level which come to estimating recurrence risk within a given family, including family history, medical history, and many other factors. Now, from our studies, we have also learned that younger siblings of children with autism are at risk for developing subclinical levels of problems. These subclinical problems involve often difficulties with language, some rigidities, some problems with social interaction, sometimes difficulty learning. We don't have a good word for it or a good sort of category for that, and for that reason, we call this set of features broader autism phenotype, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Our estimates from prospective studies suggest that about 20, maybe 25% of younger siblings have that constellation of features of broader autism phenotype. Now, so what are the early behavioral signs of autism? What have we learned about when autism emerges, when symptoms become apparent based on this particular research paradigm? Well, when we started these studies, I think we all believed that if we can only see these babies when they're 6 months old and interact with them a little bit, assess their eye contact, assess how often they smile or coo or vocalize in general, we'll be able to tell who has autism or who doesn't have autism. In fact, it's not true. All the studies that have been published thus far suggest that if we just take a look, if we just try to interact with these children, even babies who later develop autism at 6 months do not show very specific behavioral signs of the disorder. By 12 months, however, things begin to change, and by then we are beginning to see on the group level emergence of some atypical communication characteristics, atypical eye contact, and vocalizations are beginning to take on a little unusual qualities. So why is that so? Why nothing at 6 months, then a little bit at 12, and then we know that something else happens 18, 24 months, we have a full-blown syndrome? Maybe this is just a natural history of the disorder, that behavioral features do not emerge until later. It is also possible that the measures that we are using, or instruments we are using, are simply not sensitive enough to pick up more subtle signs of social disability. It is also possible that we are defining the boundaries of prodrome too narrowly. Maybe we are looking in the wrong place. We are looking at social behaviors, smiling, eye contact, reciprocity. Maybe we should look at some more elementary processes. And I'm going to talk about some of the work we do in our lab, focus on attention as one of those possible processes. So how early can we diagnose baby SIBS? Right? We have this tremendous luxury to accompany the families from birth until the age of 3. So we have the capacity to detect diagnosable cases as soon as possible. So very recently, Sally Ozanov, along with a few of us as a part of the consortium, asked that question, and we put together data from 700 or 800 high-risk babies. And each of these babies were seen at 18 months, 24, 36. At 18 months, at each time point, they were evaluated very closely, and they were assigned a best estimate diagnosis at each 3 time points. So what we found was that at 18 months, 40% of babies with autism were reliably diagnosed with the disorder. 40%. By 24 months, this number increased to 60%. And the rest of the babies were diagnosed reliably by 36 months. This suggests, and what was very interesting about this study, that the clinicians were tremendously careful. Very few children were diagnosed with autism when they really didn't have autism. So they were very careful, they were very sensitive, and they were very specific, but they were not very sensitive. So the study suggested that our current diagnostic practices appear to be very specific. We're detecting cases without over-detecting other cases. However, they are not very sensitive because we are missing quite a lot of babies, especially at 18 months. So in another study, we wanted to understand a little better what's going on at 18 months that we are missing so many kids. In this study, we did something interesting. We also pooled babies from several sites. We have about 700 of high-risk babies, which is an extremely high number for this kind of research. And what we did, we evaluated every child with the ADOS, which is the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule. And ADOS allows us to rate the child's behaviors on 30 different items, rating it from preserved to impaired. So we had 30 behaviors. Now we took every single combination of these 30 behaviors, so there were hundreds or thousands of combinations of behaviors as potential predictors of later diagnosis. We took all these combinations of items and submitted them to a data mining algorithm, which was called classification and regression trees, with the hope that the algorithm will identify the smallest and the most parsimonious set of predictors of later ASD outcomes based on behavioral observations at 18 months. And the algorithm looks like a tree, right? it's called a tree for a good reason. So, and the algorithm actually, out of these hundreds of thousands possibilities, picked basically 7 items or 6 items and 3 combinations of features to predict about 60% of cases of autism in 18 months. There are a couple of interesting features about this work. One is that there's very few items that are really important. And 2, the different combinations of features predict outcome in different groups of kids. So in one group, poor eye contact, impaired giving, and lack of communicative gestures were highly predictive of autism in one group. But there was another combination of features which actually involved intact eye contact at 18 months, emergent repetitive behaviors, mostly in speech area, and very poor giving to share with other people. And it also predicted autism, but in a different subgroup. This suggested that there might be multiple pathways to autism. And we kind of knew it before, but I think this is the first illustration, practical illustration that matters some. What was also interesting that when we compared these children, these 3 groups, in terms of verbal and nonverbal ability, it became very clear that the children who were showing the most prototypical presentation at 18 months were also the children who were the lowest functioning with regard to their verbal and nonverbal ability. So the most prototypical symptoms we are looking for in 18-monthers are likely to pick up those with big delays in language and cognition. Those who are higher functioning show actually very atypical combination of predictors. These were the ones who actually had, at this age, intact eye contact and probably would be very likely to be missed by clinicians. So what is the implication, practical implication of this esoteric study? Mostly that we need to think about if we were to design a new generation of screening or diagnostic instruments, we need to take under consideration that within a given developmental epoch, there might be different sets of predictors associated with later outcomes, and that these predictors might depend not only on language, but also on the child's representational ability or cognitive skills. So what have we learned thus far from these studies? By 24 months, we can reliably identify as many as 60% of high-risk siblings. So is it a glass half full or half empty? I would like to argue that this is a glass that's half full, and that we shouldn't despair, and we should, actually what it tells us is that we should screen early and screen often. And as we go along, we'll be picking up cases who become symptomatic at different times, at different developmental epochs, on their individual pace. Now, if we see autism, clear autism in a very young child, it's unlikely that this is going to go away. So we have a mandate to intervene. We have a mandate to help the family cope with the diagnosis and help the family system organize around this coping process, which will take a long time. The diagnostic practices that we have now and are often used in clinical university settings are working. They are not ideal, but they are working, and I think we should disseminate them more broadly into the community. And also it is our mandate to work closely on improving precision of our diagnostic instruments to make them more developmental, even more developmentally sensitive as they already are. Autism, however, when we think about autism, it's not a sort of clear-cut yes or no situation, right? It's a gradient of risk. And typically, what we are concerned about is what's happening here. What's happening with the children who already have autism? But there's this whole area here of increased risk, where children may be having some symptoms. But up till now, I don't think we have a very clear sense how serious the symptoms are, how persistent they are, and what are they? What is the range of difficulties that they are facing? So the baby-SIP studies note that about 20% of our kids develop broader autism phenotype, and that these features can be seen already as early as 12 months. So what happens after 3? What happens to these kids after 3? I would like to show you 4 single cases, just an illustration of a phenomenon that I think is very important, both clinically but also research-wise. So these are 4 kids that we saw in my clinic. This is the severity of autism symptoms. The higher, the worse. This cutoff point here, this is the marks, the clinically significant area above. And all of these boys, as it happened, at the age of 3, presented at our clinic, looking like they have this broader autism phenotype. And we were absolutely perplexed because we didn't know where they are going to go, how much help they need, what's going to happen to them. The combination of features was very, very unusual. In 3 cases, we saw a steady increase in severity of symptoms of autism from 18 to 36 months. And when we saw this little boy again, his severity of symptoms dropped dramatically, and he was diagnosed with nonverbal learning disability, which is sometimes seen in children with autism, but he didn't have autism. In this case, actually the severity increased over time, and he was diagnosed with autism. This child had unusual language, so we diagnosed him with social pragmatic difficulties. And this little guy was mostly presenting with a mix of anxiety and ADHD. The reason why I'm showing you these 4 cases is just to flag to you that even if the siblings doesn't have autism, it doesn't mean that they're okay. Or they don't need any help. There will be a group of siblings who may have enduring and chronically significant difficulties, which may go way beyond autism and extend into areas which are also likely to impact how they interact with peers and how well they can do in school. How much more time do I have? 10 minutes, okay, I'm going to zip through it very quickly. All right, so remember when I mentioned to you that now we're interested in, when we study autism, we're interested in how children communicate, how they interact with others. But perhaps we need to look at some more elementary features which might be underlying how they learn about the world and then how they act in the social world. So I am tremendously interested in attention, how children regulate their attention in response to complex environmental challenges. Leo Kanner, who was the first person who described autism, the first formalized description, was the author of the first formalized description of cases with autism, noted about one of the children that the comings and goings, even of the mother, did not seem to register, and conversation going on in the room elicited no interest. So there was this profound lack of social attention. If you want to see what it looks like, this is an 18-monther, and the examiner asked Dad, who is a marvelous, the warmest, the most sensitive, the most interactive dad you can find, asked him to make this little boy smile, and Dad is working very hard on that, and see what happens. So Dad's just chasing him around will make him smile. So why is is this happening? This is so puzzling. Babies are sensitized to eye contact, to face-to-face interaction, to motherese. This guy was using very high-pitched voice. They are sensitized to these kind of cues for joint engagement almost from birth. So why is it that this little boy cannot respond to these cues? It's a very, very puzzling question. Now we can begin to answer these kind of questions the moment we can begin to parse the underlying attentional processes. And we can do that in the lab using eye tracking technology. What we can do, we can show children something that looks like a social interaction or scene that involves people doing things. And then we can record 500 times per second where do they look. And then using some complex computational models, try to draw inferences about the processes that are underlying the children's attention in natural environments. Thanks to the progress in technology, now we can just have children sitting in front of their computer monitor and record their eye movements as they watch naturalistic scenes. It looks pretty much like that. You can see a red circle here. That is this little boy's point of regard. And we record closely where he's looking, when he's looking, and what is the sequence of his fixations. There are many variables that can be derived from these kind of paradigms. So what we did in one of studies was to try to understand if we present children with naturalistic scenes when a person does a variety of different things, how children with autism know what's most important, what they should be looking at. And it's not the idea of selecting social versus non-social stimuli. Sometimes it's the idea of which social stimulus is most important. Just to give you an example, in one of the conditions, a person was talking to the camera. No, she's making a sandwich. There are a lot of distractors. She's doing something important here. Her face is not important. So what we would like to or expect typical babies to do is actually monitor her activity, because this is part of the learning by imitation. They learn, they observe, they parse the action, and it's a very, very important mode of knowledge acquisition. In a situation like that, she's speaking to the baby. In this situation, when someone is talking to you, looking at her hands makes absolutely no sense. You have to look at her face, because that's where the information is, right? So what we did, we conducted a number of studies, and some of them involve examination of the latent structure of gaze patterns in toddlers with autism. And what we found was something interesting. We found that the impairment we see in real life in children with autism is not driven by a unitary construct. It's not driven by one thing. It's driven by at least two different things. And one thing, which was very important, is the very elementary capacity to direct attention toward complex social scene. So it's as simple as I'm looking at it or I'm not looking at it. And that decision to look at something new and complex versus look away can be driven by a number of factors. Saliency network might be underlying selection of something that's that may be important, or maybe they have some attentional difficulties, which are like children with ADHD, which prevent them from sustained attention to something that's complex. So that's one level of impairment. The second level of impairment was that when they were looking at this scene, they didn't know what's important. So they would look at her hands when she was speaking, or at her face when she was making the sandwich. They simply didn't know what's important. They were not avoiding anything. They didn't know what's important. And that second type of impairment can be a natural consequence of limited salience of social stimuli if present early in life. Now we know that poor performance of these kind of tasks was associated later on with greater severity of autism symptoms and also lower levels of cognitive functioning. So attention gates learning. If children are not attending very early in development, where they can potentially learn from, that's going to affect their development downstream. So the next question is, okay, so we see these deficits in children who are 18 months old and they're presenting for diagnostic differentiation in the clinic. But many of the processes that underlie selection of social targets in natural environment are already in place very early in infancy. So perhaps the question was, can we see similar types of deficits in infant siblings before the behavioral symptoms begin to emerge? And what we did, we showed infant siblings when they were 6 months old, the same set of stimuli. These babies were then followed until they were 3, and we divided them into those with autism, those with broader autism phenotype, typically developing children. And what we found was that their looking patterns were not identical to those seen in older children, but they were very resemblant. They were resembling it in that these children have difficulties attending to the scene, and when they look at the scene, they spend less time looking at the person and less time looking at her face. And we were able to replicate this study with a very different procedure, finding convergence across in the same cohort but across different methods. And what was very interesting was that we saw continuity from the prodromal stages of the disorder to syndromal stages of the disorder. We are working right now on testing, piloting experiments that will help us understand why this is happening. So, just to sum up, attention seems to be a very important facet in development of children with autism. We have now convergent evidence from a couple of studies that selection, ability to select for processing, the most important or most salient aspects of social scenes is impaired, and there is a continuity between the prodromal and early syndromal stage, and also across risk populations. This presents two very important translational opportunities. First of all, we all are looking for markers. We want to find relatively simple procedures which will help us differentiate kids who later develop autism from those who don't. Right now, we don't have good marker tasks, but we need a signal here. And so the next step will be to refine these eye tracking strategies to improve identification of siblings who are at risk for developing autism or related disorders. We are working on it. The second thing, if we really believe that attention gates learning, improving attention in very young infants with autism may have potentially quite significant and cascading effects on later development. Again, we are testing right now a computer-based procedure to do so in very young and vulnerable children. And finally, thinking more broadly about early detection and early diagnosis, current diagnostic practices are quite effective. We need to do better, not because we are overdiagnosing children, but because we're missing some children. We need to consider the possibility that there might be multiple pathways to autism and possibly multiple sets of markers for children with different levels of probability. And we also need to consider the fact that anytime we see a child in a clinic that looks like it may have autism, we need to consider that their presentation might be colored by the fact that this child might be also developing anxiety, ADHD, or learning disability. So we need to be able to evaluate interaction between the factors that are creating autistic phenotypes compared to the phenotypes related to anxiety or ADHD. Now, studies of facets of attention offer promise for advancing understanding of the underlying processes and identifying novel treatment targets. And as we move along with our research, it becomes tremendously important and tremendously clear that our work will be much strengthened if we're able to work with larger samples to capture heterogeneity of the syndrome expression and also evaluate factors that might be influencing outcomes with regard to mediation or moderation effects. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. I would like to also thank all the parents and children who participate in our study. Without you, nothing what we do would be possible. Thank our funding agencies and my various collaborators with my lab. Thank you.